In this video, I'm going to attempt to articulate through graphical animation how your egoic mind can never eliminate itself to experience a life of permanent peace and happiness. For example, say that you have anxiety and you're seeing a therapist for it. Now, we can all agree that this works temporarily. We go and we talk about it, and it does calm these negative tendencies. But a few days later, these negative tendencies come back, and we start to worry and lose sleep again. And it just goes in that cycle. It fires up. We go to a counselor. It calms down. But then a few days later, it fires back up again. And it's this relentless cycle of suffering. Well, this video shows us that that can never, ever solve the problem completely. And that there's only one way to do that, and that is through self-enquiry. And this graphic shows how it alleviates the egoic mind so that you can experience a life of permanent contentment. If you are somebody who learns through graphical analysis, like this video that you're about to watch, I have an entire playlist dedicated to these types of videos. Some of these videos are a step-by-step guide to end suffering, a step-by-step guide to self-realization through self-enquiry. I have an overview of what self-realization is, and there are several others on there as well. I will link this below in the notes. Take care. We are going to start from the perspective of ego and work our way out into the egoic mind to analyze the mechanics of the mind to show you how the mind, or the ego, can never get out of itself. It just puts itself into an infinite loop that it can never get out of. So we're going to start down here with self. And this is the universal mind of awareness. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about two minds. We're going to talk about the egoic mind, and we're going to talk about the universal mind. So I'm going to do my best to articulate between these two minds whenever I'm referring to them. But most likely, it's going to be the egoic mind. So if I say mind, it's the ego mind. So down here, this is this infinite ocean of existence, being, consciousness, and bliss. This is who we are at our core, at our origin. And these words correlate to the three Sanskrit words of Sat, Chit, Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss. And bliss can be described as the qualities that come out of knowing yourself. So when awareness becomes aware of its own existence, so when Sat becomes aware of Chit, what comes out of that is bliss. And that can be experienced as silence, stillness, peace, and happiness. And again, these are just words. These words don't quite get there. It's better than this. But these are the words that we use. And out of self, everything arises out of, especially the ego. And the ego is an effort. So self is complete stillness and silence. There's absolutely no movement to it. And therefore, any movement that we're aware of, any movement, it could be a thought, it could be an emotion, it can be one of our five senses, it can be anything, is considered ego. And here I have it as an effort. So ego is movement, and self is stillness. So, again, the effort is any movement away from self. Now, we can put all sorts of words on the word effort. It could be motion, or movement, or tendencies, or inclinations, or urges, anything that gets us to move away from the stillness of ourself. And at the root of ego, or the mind, or the I, is the root of I. So this is what I'm saying is the ego is rooted in self, which is a good thing because that means that it has always a tether back home to itself. But until this root is removed, the ego cannot be dissolved. And so this effort, these efforts are movements to rid ourself of our egoic self. Okay, so this effort is turning itself back around to attack itself. Okay, and in this example, these efforts are an attempt to make us happy, to remove us from our psychological suffering so that we can experience a life that is more pleasant. And so what happens when the ego makes an effort to come back around to better itself and to chop itself down in this effort to make itself happier, it can't quite get to the root. The ego's effort to eliminate itself originates from its own effort, and therefore can never get before the initial effort. So this is why practices such as daily affirmations or positive thinking, therapy, even meditation, focusing on chanting or mindfulness, because all of these have an original effort to have daily affirmations. First, you have to have an effort that sends that back onto itself. But it can never ever get in front of the initial effort. And therefore, it only temporarily solves the problem. Because we can agree that therapy and daily affirmations and meditation, they do help. They do help to temporarily alleviate our egoic suffering. Yet, and this is the dissolving of it, of our psychological suffering, yet there is always a piece of ego left, of effort left. It never gets at the root of the problem, which is the original, initial effort itself. So what happens? Because the root of the problem was not removed, the process starts all over again. This is known as suffering, or samsara. Samsara is these cycles of happiness and unhappiness, discontent and content, and all of that cycling through it. And this is why things such as therapy and positive thinking, it works temporarily, but because it doesn't get to the root, this effort starts up again. That's why we always have to go back to our counselors. That's why we have to continue to stay on medication. That's why we have to continue to meditate, because it never ever gets to the root of the problem. And again, it just starts over again. It's a cycle that we're all aware of. By turning the effort onto the source of itself, the ego, or the mind, begins to realize is the only way to experience everlasting peace and happiness. So, instead of the ego, instead of the efforts to try to eliminate itself, if it turns its attention back onto the source of itself, which is itself, it will see that this is the only solution that delivers permanent results. And what are these permanent results? Peace and happiness. The more the ego abides in its source, which is self, the more it eliminates itself. So this abiding in source is self-enquiry. This is why, especially on this channel, that we continuously bring to the forefront how important self-enquiry is. Because self-enquiry turns this effort, turns your attention back onto the true solution, which is yourself. And it slowly erodes the necrotic, egoic mind. And the more you do it, the more you do self-enquiry, it's these efforts, this ego, this psychological suffering starts to die down. And this is what I call the relentless pursuit of effortlessness. You are, in self-enquiry, relinquishing your egoic efforts by abiding in self. And in this abidance, you experience yourself as effortlessness more and more. And that is one of the qualities, you could say, that comes out of when Sat experiences itself as Chit. That's the bliss. Abiding in self dissolves the root of I. So abiding in self is like pouring gasoline on the roots of a tree. It will kill the tree. You know, you could remove limbs of the tree, you could remove some bark of the tree, and you could remove leaves of the tree, but none of this is going to kill the tree. The only way to kill the tree is to get it at its roots. And that's what self-enquiry does. This abidance in being eliminates the I at its root, and it dissolves it. When the root of I fully dissolves, the ego is eliminated, and all that remains is self, peace, happiness, and love. Therefore, the only effort that can possibly create permanent change is relentlessly turning your attention onto yourself and abiding there absolutely. Permanent abidance in self is the non-objective, direct experience of thought-free awareness, which is immense silence and stillness, ultimate peace, your true nature. And here is a quote by the master sage himself, Sri Ramana Maharshi. It comes from Who Am I? Nanyar, and it's number 25. Remaining quiet, which is silent, still, and peaceful, is what is called wisdom insight. To remain quiet is to resolve the mind in the self. And that's exactly what we went over here. That the mind cannot eliminate itself. The mind has to resolve or dissolve itself by abiding in self. And when it does that, your psychological suffering dissolves and you experience your true nature directly. And that is known as peace and happiness and love. Take care.